always hated the sound of fireworks. Everyone else heard celebration. I heard explosions pretending to be joy. They rattled my cave like distant cannon fire, shaking loose memories I'd buried under snow and bitterness. Down in Whoville, lights flickered like nervous stars, counting down to midnight. The air itself buzzed, thick with anticipation, as if the world were holding its breath. And for the first time, I realized something terrible. The new year was watching me. I didn't always know the new year was alive. No one does. They think it's just a moment, numbers changing, calendars flipping, promises already doomed to fail. But I had been studying the patterns for years. Every January 1st, the world reset, hope returned, regret softened. Even I felt lighter. And I despised that. Hope is dangerous. Hope makes people forget. Hope makes them try again. So this year, I decided to kill it. I stood before my machine, an ugly, beautiful thing of wires, stolen bells, cracked hourglasses, and one very important artifact at its heart. A fragment of the first firework, taken from Santa's vault long ago. He never noticed. He never notices until it's too late. Outside, the snow began to fall upward. That was the first sign I'd gone too far. "What in the frost-bitten?" I muttered, adjusting a dial. The machine hummed, then whispered. Not mechanically, personally. "Grinch." I froze. I don't scare easily. Fear requires something you care about losing. But that voice slithered into places I'd sealed off years ago. "You're not real," I growled. "You're just a date on a calendar." The cave darkened. The glow from Whoville dimmed, like someone lowering the sun with a nervous hand. Fireworks fizzled mid-air, hanging frozen like dying stars. Then the countdown clocks across town stopped. 11:59 forever. The whisper became a chorus. "You seek to end me. You seek to erase becoming." The ground cracked beneath my feet, not stone, but time itself, splitting into glowing fractures that pulsed with memories. I saw flashes inside them, children laughing, old grudges forgiven, strangers hugging at midnight. Disgusting. "I seek silence," I snapped, "an end to false beginnings." The machine reached full power. That's when the door exploded inward. Snow and sparks burst through as a red and white blur slammed into my cave wall. Bells rang, not cheerful this time, but sharp warning chimes that stabbed at my ears. Santa Claus rose from the rubble, eyes glowing like embers beneath storm clouds. "Step away from the engine," he said quietly. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Oh, now you show up? Little late, don't you think?" He looked past me, to the fractures, the frozen clocks, the sky tearing itself open. For the first time I saw fear flicker across his ancient face. "You don't understand what you've awakened," Santa said. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied, throwing the final lever. "I'm ending the loop. No more fresh starts. No more pretending tomorrow will fix yesterday."
The machine screamed, not malfunctioned, screamed.
A shape began to form above it, pulling itself together from light, shadow, firework ash, and falling snow. It had no single face, just countless reflections layered together, some young, some old, some heartbreakingly familiar. The new year stepped into existence, and it looked straight at me. "You cannot kill what you are part of," it said, not aloud, but everywhere at once. "You were born from a year that ended in sorrow." My chest tightened. Santa moved beside me, his voice low. "Grinch, shut it down. Now, if midnight never comes, I know what happens," I shouted. "No more healing, no more lies." The entity raised its hand. Outside, Whoville's people froze mid-celebration. Their breath crystallized in the air. Fireworks reversed, collapsing back into unlit shells. The sky darkened into a swirling clock face, numbers bleeding into one another. "You want an ending," the new year said, "then face the cost." We fell. Through years, through moments, through everything I had tried so hard not to feel. Santa grabbed my arm as we plunged into the abyss between seconds. "Hold on!" he shouted. I didn't. I looked up at the living embodiment of time itself and snarled, "Do your worst." And the new year smiled. Falling through time feels nothing like falling through air. There's no wind, no weight, just memories slamming into you like invisible walls. I tumbled through scenes I didn't ask to see. New Year's I'd survived, ruined or hidden from. Snowball fights I pretended not to miss. Fireworks reflected in shop windows I'd smashed out of spite. A younger version of me, smaller, quieter, watching celebrations from afar. I clenched my teeth. "This is a trick," I snarled into the void. "Everything here is true," the new year replied, its voice echoing from every direction. "Truth is the currency between seconds." We landed hard on something solid. Not ground, a clock face the size of a city, floating in endless dark. Its numbers glowed faintly, cracked and bleeding light. Gears the size of houses turned slowly beneath translucent ice. Firework sparks drifted like dying fireflies, frozen mid-burst. Santa groaned as he pushed himself up beside me. His red coat was dull now, drained of cheer, his bells silent. "Welcome," he muttered, "to the worst place in existence." I blinked. "You've been here before?" He met my eyes. "Every year. I just don't usually stay long." That unsettled me more than the abyss. The new year manifested again, taller here, clearer. Not monstrous, not kind, just inevitable. Its form shifted with every step, cycling through faces at midnight. Joy, grief, relief, regret. "Rule 1, it said. "Between years, nothing can be destroyed, only transformed." I laughed bitterly. Figures. Santa turned sharply. "Listen to it, Grinch. This place obeys rules older than either of us." The entity gestured, and the clock face split. From the cracks crawled shapes made of sparks and smoke, countdown spirits. Their bodies ticked and chimed, faces locked in permanent anticipation, mouths opening and closing in silent counting. 10, 9, 8. My machine hadn't just woken the new year. It had summoned its guardians. "Spirits of transition," Santa whispered. "They enforce midnight." The nearest spirit lunged. I rolled aside just as its arm, made of exploding fireworks, sliced through the air where my head had been.
The impact scorched the clock face, numbers melting like wax. "Oh no, you don't!" I snapped, grabbing a cracked hourglass from the ground. I smashed it against the spirit's chest. Time spilled out like glowing sand. The spirit screamed, not in pain, but in delay, and froze mid-motion, its ticking stuttering. Santa stared. "You just slowed it." I smirked. "Rule 1, remember? Transform, not destroy." More spirits advanced, counting louder now. 7, 6. Santa raised his staff, which flickered weakly. "My magic is tied to midnight. Without it—" "I know, you're running on fumes." A deep rumble moved beneath the clock face. The ground rang like a bell struck too hard. From below emerged something far worse. Firework Wraiths, twisted beings of smoke and light, their bodies constantly detonating and reforming. They screamed with the sound of celebration gone wrong. The New Year's voice softened, almost regretful. "Rule 2, it said. Every ending demands a witness." The Wraiths charged. I felt something twist inside me, not fear, recognition. "These things," I muttered, dodging an explosion of red sparks, "they're made of failed celebrations." "Yes," Santa said grimly, "New Year's where hope didn't stick." We fought back to back, me with stolen time, Santa with fading starlight. Each clash sent shockwaves through the clock face, cracking more numbers. 5, 4. The New Year watched us, not interfering. "Why aren't you stopping them?" I shouted at it. "Because this is your choice," it replied. "Kill the New Year, or learn what must be sacrificed to let it live." A wraith slammed into me, knocking me to my knees. For the first time in years, something inside my chest hurt, not physically. "What do you want from me?" I growled. The entity leaned closer. "Rule 3, it whispered. Midnight requires a heart willing to change." The numbers began to glow brighter. 3, 2. Santa grabbed my shoulder, eyes wide. "Grinch, if midnight doesn't happen soon, the world will fracture permanently." I looked at the frozen fireworks above us, at the spirits counting down without a future, at Santa, weak but still standing, and at myself. 1. The clock face began to shatter. The clock face didn't explode. It cried out. A deep, resonant chime rolled through the void, shaking the space between seconds. Cracks raced outward like lightning frozen in glass. Each number peeled away from the surface and drifted upward, spinning slowly, glowing brighter with every breath I took. Midnight was trying to happen, and it was angry. Santa staggered as a shock wave rippled through him. His staff dimmed to a dull ember, the carved stars along its length flickering like dying candles. "Grinch," he said hoarsely, "you need to listen very carefully now." I wiped sparks and ash from my fur, staring at the chaos I'd unleashed. This better not be another lecture. His voice dropped. "I've seen this before. Long ago. The New Year always asks for the same thing." The Firework Wraiths recoiled, writhing as if something unseen was pulling them apart. The countdown spirits froze mid-step, their ticking warped and distorted. The New Year descended slowly, its form stabilizing, less fragmented now, more focused. Its many faces narrowed into one. Mine. Not exactly as I am now, but as I once was. Smaller, quieter,
standing at the edge of a celebration I wasn't invited to. My breath caught. "Midnight does not need your death," the New Year said. "It needs your ending." I laughed bitterly. "That's the same thing." Santa shook his head. "No, it isn't." The entity extended his hand, and suddenly the void shifted. We stood in a frozen Whoville square, fireworks locked mid-bloom, confetti suspended like snowflakes that forgot how to fall. Everyone was smiling. Everyone, except one small figure standing in the shadows. Me. I remembered this night. I had stood there years ago, watching people hug, laugh, promise things they wouldn't keep. I'd felt invisible, forgotten, left behind by a year that took more than it gave. "This is where it started," I whispered. "This is where you decided endings were safer than beginnings," the New Year replied. The sky darkened. From behind the buildings, something enormous stirred. The final bell, a colossal spectral construct suspended above the square, cracked and rusted, its surface etched with every New Year wish ever abandoned. Santa stiffened. "Oh no," he breathed. "It's invoking the last rule."
I glared at him. "You said 3. "There's always one more," he said quietly. "There always is." The bell tolled once. The sound went through me, not my ears, but my memories. I saw every plan I'd ruined, every celebration I'd sabotaged, every moment I'd told myself I didn't care. "Rule 4, the New Year intoned. "To let the future begin, the past must be released." The bell began to lower, inch by inch, toward the frozen square. "What happens when it rings?" I asked, though I already felt the answer clawing its way up my spine. Santa met my eyes. "It takes what you refuse to let go." The Firework Wraiths started screaming again, being pulled toward the bell like smoke to a chimney. The countdown spirits knelt, their numbers dissolving. The bell was hungry. "You knew!" I snapped at Santa. "You knew this was the price!" "I hoped," he said softly, "that it wouldn't come to this." The New Year turned to me. "You tried to kill me because you fear beginnings. Endings feel honest to you." I clenched my fists. "Endings don't disappoint." "No," it replied. "They just leave you alone." The bell loomed directly overhead now, shadows stretching long and crooked across the square. "Choose," the New Year said. "Cling to what made you, or let it end." Santa stepped forward. "Grinch, if you don't choose, the bell will, and it won't be gentle." I looked at the frozen version of myself in the shadows, at the world stuck forever at 11:59, at Santa, tired, ancient, still fighting for a future that might not even include him. My throat tightened. For someone who wanted to end the New Year, this is a rotten way to start it. The bell began its final descent. The bell rang, not loudly, intimately. It sounded like a breath taken after a long sob, like the final note of a song you didn't know was ending. The vibration passed through my fur, into my chest, and straight into the places I'd boarded up and labeled "Do Not Enter." The frozen square shattered, not violently, gently, as if reality were peeling itself apart layer by layer. The fireworks dissolved into sparks that drifted upward and vanished. The smiling faces blurred into memories, then into nothing. The bell hovered before me now, impossibly close. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. The new year stepped forward, no longer towering, no longer frightening, just present. "What you've been carrying," it said, "what you've mistaken for protection." The bell rang again, and suddenly I was small, not physically, inside. In a dim, snow-choked alley behind Whoville's main square, the sounds of celebration echoed distantly, muffled by brick and loneliness. I remembered this moment with painful clarity now. I had waited for someone to notice, for someone to call me over, for proof that the new year meant something different for me. No one came. I had clenched my fists that night and decided something permanent. If the new year wouldn't choose me, I wouldn't choose it either. The bell pulsed. Santa appeared beside me in the memory, older even than usual, his face lined with regret. "I didn't see you," he said quietly. "That was my failure." I stared at him. "You don't get to apologize now." "I know," he replied, "but you deserve the truth." The memory shifted. I saw Santa that same night, high above Whoville, racing the midnight winds, his sleigh damaged, his magic faltering. He had missed things, missed people, missed me. The bell rang a third time. Pain bloomed, not sharp, not cruel, but deep. Something inside me began to loosen, threads I'd wrapped so tightly around my heart that I'd forgotten they were there. The new year spoke softly now. "This is what the bell takes. Not your anger, not your strength, but the moment you decided you were unworthy of beginning again." "No," I whispered. "That's all I have." Santa's voice broke. "It doesn't have to be." The bell glowed blindingly bright. I felt the memory slipping, not erased, but unbound, the bitterness draining out of it like color from old photographs. The ache remained, but it no longer owned me. The Firework Wraiths screamed one final time as they were pulled into the bell, collapsing into harmless sparks. The countdown spirits dissolved into gentle chimes that drifted upward and faded. The bell rose, higher, higher, until it vanished. Silence fell. Then a single sound. Tick. The clock face beneath us reformed, numbers locking back into place, the cracks sealed, light flowed forward instead of backward. Midnight struck. The world exhaled, fireworks reignited, not frozen, not violent, but alive. Time surged forward in a warm, unstoppable wave. Whoville unfroze, laughter spilling back into the streets like something long withheld. The new year smiled, not at the world, at me. "You did not kill me," it said. "You let me live." Its form began to fade, dissolving into light, into snowfall, into possibility. Santa collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. His staff flared back to life, brighter than I'd ever seen it. I stood there, stunned. "Is it over?" I asked. Santa looked up slowly. "For the world?" he said. "Yes." Then he met my eyes. No. Behind us, the air warped. Something else had been watching, and it wasn't finished. The cold came back first. Not winter cold. Absence cold. The kind that doesn't freeze skin, but drains meaning from the air. Fireworks still bloomed above Whoville, laughter echoed faintly below us. Yet here, between seconds, everything dulled, as if color itself were being erased. Santa pushed himself upright, gripping his staff like a weapon. "Step behind me," he said. I snorted. "I think we're past pretending I'm the helpless one." The air split. Not cracked, unzipped. From the tear crawled something that had never known celebration. Its body was long and skeletal, woven from dead calendars, broken clocks, and ashes of extinguished fireworks. Its face was a smooth, dark void, save for a single symbol burned into it. 0000. Santa went pale. "Oh, frost and starlight," he whispered. "It followed us." "What is that thing?" I demanded. The creature's voice slithered out, scraping against reality like nails on ice. "I am the last second. I am what remains when hope is spent. I devour tomorrows." The new year hadn't been my enemy. This was. Santa lowered his voice. "When people stop believing that next year can be better, it feeds." The creature drifted closer, every movement erasing sound behind it. Fireworks went silent where it passed, collapsing into gray dust. "You weakened the cycle," it hissed at me. "You almost ended it. You belong to me." My stomach twisted. Funny, everyone else seems to think I belong to redemption. The last second laughed, a dry, ticking sound. "Redemption is inefficient." Santa raised his staff, unleashing a burst of golden light that struck the creature squarely. It passed through. The last second didn't even flinch. Santa staggered back. "It can't be fought with force." "Then how?" I snapped. The creature loomed over Whoville now, stretching downward, its shadow spilling into the streets. People below shivered without knowing why, unease creeping into their joy. "I will finish what you began. I will consume this new year before it grows strong." Something burned inside me. Not anger, resolve. "You said midnight needs a heart willing to change," I muttered. "Nobody said it had to be comfortable." Santa's eyes widened. "Grinch, don't." I stepped forward. The last second recoiled slightly, surprised. "I tried to kill the new year because I thought endings were safer," I said aloud, my voice echoing across the fractured sky. "Turns out I was just afraid of being disappointed again." The creature hissed. "Words do not stop entropy." "No," I agreed, "but choices do." I reached into my chest, not physically, but deeper, and pulled out what the bell had loosened. Not the pain, but the space it left behind. Hope hates emptiness. I filled it. The air around me ignited, not with fire, but with soft, radiant light, the kind that comes just before dawn. Around us, fireworks flared brighter, laughter below growing louder as people hugged a little tighter without knowing why. The last second screamed. "You cannot create hope," it shrieked. I smiled, slow, crooked, genuine. "I'm not creating it. I'm choosing it." The light surged outward, not attacking, but overwhelming, flooding the creature with unfinished dreams, second chances, promises whispered at midnight and actually meant. The last second began to unravel, its body cracking into fragments of dead time. Santa stared in awe. "Grinch, you're acting as a conduit." "Don't get sentimental," I growled. "I hate that." With one final echoing wail, the creature collapsed into a harmless shower of sparks that faded into the night sky. Silence returned. Then, warmth. The realm between seconds began to dissolve, reality knitting itself whole again. Santa stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You saved it," he said softly. "The new year, the future." I looked down at Whoville, where people danced beneath fireworks that felt different now. Don't spread it around, ruins my reputation. The world shifted. Snow, ground, home. But something about me had changed, and I wasn't sure if that scared me or thrilled me.
Dawn crept in quietly. No fireworks, no bells, just a pale, hesitant light spilling over the snow like it wasn't sure it was welcome yet. I stood at the edge of Mount Crumpet, looking down at Whoville. Smoke curled from chimneys. People moved slowly now, sleepy, content, unaware of how close the world had come to freezing forever at 11:59. Santa stood beside me, his silhouette outlined in gold. He looked older in the daylight, not weaker, just real. "Well," I said, breaking the silence, "if you're here to arrest me for crimes against time, I'd like to point out I technically saved it." Santa chuckled softly. "You always did like technicalities." We watched the sun climb. "The thing you fought," he said at last, "doesn't appear often. Only when someone stands at the edge of ending everything and steps back." I frowned. "That doesn't sound reassuring." "It isn't," Santa replied. "It means you're visible now." I turned to him sharply. "Visible to what?" "To the magic that governs beginnings," he said, "to the forces that guard them, and to those that fear them." That made my fur itch. Before I could respond, Santa reached into his coat and pulled out something small and faintly glowing, a silver bell, cracked but mended, its surface etched with tiny numbers spiraling inward. "This," he said, "is the first chime."
I recognized it instantly. "You said it was destroyed," I whispered. "I said it was lost," Santa corrected. "There's a difference." He placed it in my hand. It was warm. "The first chime rings once every year, not at midnight, but just after. It doesn't reset the world. It listens to it." I stared at him. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because," Santa said gently, "because you hear things others don't." I scoffed. "That's one way to describe chronic bitterness." He smiled. "It's also how guardians are made." The word hit harder than any bell. "Absolutely not," I snapped. "I'm not joining some secret New Year watch with a uniform and a motto." "There's no uniform," Santa said, "and no one will cheer." That gave me pause. "This isn't a reward," he went on. "It's a responsibility. You would stand where endings bleed into beginnings. You would watch for fractures, for people like you before they become like the last second." I looked down at Whoville again, at families finishing breakfast, at tired smiles that still believed this year might be different. "And if I say no?" I asked quietly. Santa nodded. "Then the bell stays silent. The new year continues, and you live your life." That should have been comforting. It wasn't, because something inside me, the space where bitterness used to sit, felt restless. I closed my fingers around the first chime. "When does it ring?" I asked. Santa's eyes twinkled. "When someone decides the future isn't worth it."
As if summoned by the words, the bell trembled. Far away, beyond Whoville, beyond the mountains, something shifted. I felt it. A tug, a fracture, a choice being made somewhere in the world. The bell chimed, soft, almost afraid. I exhaled slowly. "You couldn't have waited a week," I muttered. Santa laughed, stepping back toward his sleigh. "Happy New Year, Grinch!" He vanished in a swirl of snow and starlight. I stood alone on the mountain, the bell warm in my palm, dawn brightening the sky. For the first time in my life, the new year wasn't something happening to me. It was something waiting for me to respond. The first chime led me east, not with a map, with a feeling. It tugged gently at my chest, like a thread tied to something fragile and trembling. I followed it down the mountain, across frozen valleys, through forests where the snow still remembered night. I didn't rush. Beginnings don't like being chased. The pole stopped at a small, forgotten town. No lights, no fireworks, no laughter. Just a single house at the edge of the road, its windows dark, its door dusted with untouched snow. Inside, I felt it, that familiar heaviness, that dangerous quiet. I stood on the porch for a long moment, listening. A clock ticked inside, not counting down, just waiting. I rang the bell. Not the first chime, the doorbell. Hesitant footsteps approached, slow, hesitant. The door opened just a crack, revealing a man with tired eyes and shoulders bowed under a year that clearly hadn't been kind. "Yes?" he asked. I cleared my throat. "This might sound strange, but are you planning on ending something tonight?" He stared at me confused. Then his eyes flicked past me to the pale morning sky. "I already did," he said quietly. "I gave up." The first chime rang softly in my pocket. I nodded. "Yeah, I've been there."
We stood in silence. Then, awkwardly, I said, "Do you want to hear something ridiculous?" He hesitated. "I suppose." "Midnight already happened," I said, "and the world didn't end, which is honestly very disappointing, considering the effort I put into trying." He blinked. Then, just barely, he smiled. We talked, not about hope, not about resolutions, just about surviving bad years and how exhausting it is to pretend you're fine when you're not. When I left, the first chime was quiet again, satisfied. By the time I returned to Mount Crumpet, the sun was fully up. Whoville sparkled below, ordinary, imperfect, alive. Santa was waiting. "I wondered how long it would take," he said. "I'm not a hero," I muttered. "No," Santa agreed. "You're something rarer." I frowned. "What's that?" "Proof," he said gently, "that even those who try to end the future can choose to protect it." The first chime rang once more, soft, content. I looked out at the world, at years waiting to be lived, at endings that didn't have to be permanent, at beginnings that didn't need to be allowed to matter. "I still hate fireworks," I said. Santa smiled. "That's allowed." The wind shifted. Snow fell. Somewhere a clock turned forward without fear. And for the first time in my life, the new year didn't feel like a lie. It felt like an invitation.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Ho, ho, ho.
If you liked the story, subscribe and like it, and also write a comment about what topic you would like to hear about.